majority of this information, to some degree, right? So, um, I don't know if you've seen the movie. Um, I feel like in my Psycho 5 class that they're doing research on me for some reason. I don't know why, but I feel like some reason they're doing unethical for something. I never did look into it, um, or never to get anybody to do research on me. Um, and I know it sounds crazy as it is, right? But I feel as if they're able to read my thoughts, right? And they're able to manipulate my body parts, right? Throughout the majority of this movie. I would say the last or the last, well, technically I didn't, technically there was no school I went to. So the last two Wednesdays, let's say, um, the last two Wednesdays, or after, how would I say it? So the last two Mondays, um, when I was leaving the Psych 45 class my way to church, right? And I'm just like, wow, like it was just hurting. So I don't like there's something that I'm breathing in, something going on in that classroom because um, when I leave it, that's when my leg starts to hurt. Even like so, even sometimes here at home. So I don't know if they're doing the same thing here, right? And my school or whatever. But I don't have a problem with any of the people there, right? But it just seems like it's just been happening after the fact, like with the classroom. Anyways, that's not why I got on right now. I got on because I'm thinking about people being biased in their research, right? In this case. So my example was today. Um, and so what happened in class today was the teachers were given about 20 minutes to discuss on different topics that were on the news, right? So um, I don't really like to socialize with my classmates um, because for the simple fact is that I just feel like almost all of them, if not all of them, or just a selective few, are reading my thoughts, right? And so like I don't know, like I don't want to be around people who are fake, right? I understand there's fakeness all around us, and sometimes we like to make it, right? But I think I outgrew that phase, and I'd rather be like myself than someone who is fake, right? So, anyways, um, so that's why I'm doing the research on myself in the five class. However, majority of the class, they were like I would say about 50% of the class, right? They were conversing with other students, and I feel like these students that are talking to each other, they probably took courses together. They know each other, and that's what it seems like to me by the conversations that they're having. They're like they're like it just seems like they had a social interaction before they took the class, right? There was a few people that I noticed that weren't really socializing. However, when I looked at them, they were doing something to like distract themselves, right? So and so I was just sitting there by myself. I kind of got bored, right? And then I started drawing to distract myself, right? And then I got bored of drawing, and so then I was like, I might as well do something interesting that's actually going to like going to be beneficial. And so I started taking care of tasks, right? I started doing the tasks that I needed to do, which was trying to get myself into class. I leave the room, I call, and by the time I'm leaving the room and making the phone call, the teacher, she pops up. Um, and going back to I forgot that part. She kind of left us like after like I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes before break time. For a lesson into the classroom, I would say the classroom as a whole brainstorming or just like talking to other people, non-talking, right? People who are just socializing. After like 3 or 4 minutes of that, the teacher leaves the room. I'm there for about like I don't know, a couple of minutes. She's leaving. I leave the room to make a phone call to the debit card company. And as I'm leaving the room, the teacher is coming back into the room because she has left the room. And so then I go back in, and then so I'm just like, oh, the teacher's back, so I'll just put my phone call on hold. Um, basically, I'll just call them back, like the credit card company, their debit card company back, and they're gonna get out of class. So I get back to class, and then like for some reason I heard a student saying like, oh, like I want to do research on ADHD, and I kind of felt like they're trying to diagnose me with with something, right? That's the research. Like, hey, like let's do something about like what like the symptoms that you're displaying. But like wouldn't that mean like that a lot of people have ADHD, right? And ADHD is attentive it's called a attention disorder hyper deficit or something like that, or attention deficit hyper disorder, something like that, right? And so what that means is like the person has a hard time um, paying attention, and they like kind of switch tabs because their mind goes in different places, right? But like like I would like so like for example like but then I could diagnose my classmates with ADHD because if they're on their phones, right? If they're on their phones, then that means and if they're like on TikTok or any type of social media and they're switching from one profile to the next, what does that mean? Because that means they got an attention disorder because for the simple fact is that they're switching their attention from one profile to the next profile. Or even if they're flipping between meetings or whatever it is, the algorithm shows that they have ADHD because it's gonna show them a bunch of topics, right? They got a bunch of different topics that interest them, and so that if you have a bunch of different topics that interest you, that basically means one, right? You got a short attention span, meaning you have multiple things to entertain you, or it can just be or it can be the exact thing that you're just interested in different things, right? Different bad things. And so like and that's the same thing with ADHD. Just because I'm interested in different things based on a given time doesn't mean that I have ADHD or anything. That just means that they have their brain is working so effortlessly that that they get bored, and that's what makes smart people. Like that's what makes smart people. Like people who are innovators and people who create things. It's because they get bored of the same thing, so they have to they have to like jump from one thing to another thing because that thing no longer excites them, right? And that's psychology, right? And and yes, I could be biased in my research and do a blind experiment, which means that the participant who's who, the participants who are in my experience don't know that I'm experiencing on them, right? But that creates a bias because I'm selecting people, right? Even if I'm doing it by age group, ethnicity, region, environment, right? That's I'm still selecting them out of the pool. That's still a bias to me in a sense, right? And I think the only way you can get rid of that bias, or try, but basically like try not to be manipulative in what I'm saying, is to have a double blind experience where the patient nor does the researcher knows what is happening, and you can't do that, without someone else gauging that, without someone else collecting that data. So there's no such thing as a double blind experiment. There's no, because there has to be someone collecting that data, and in order for that person to be collecting that data, they have to have a bias in that data collection, right? So for example, it's like saying like, hey, like I'm like it's like I'm gonna set up an experiment, and you can tell me whether then don't tell me whether you used it or you didn't implement it, but but then but you collect data on that, and so then that so by me telling that to someone else, I'm like subconsciously I know, or just consciously too, right? I know that there's a research being done, and that I am trying to obtain some type of information from that experiment. Um, and so that's why I say that it's biased in a way, right? Even the double blind experiment. Um, so like I was just having this conversation on the bus with a smart individual. That person seemed smart to me because um, they were giving me information that I didn't know, right? Or information that I hadn't gotten. So, and I just feel like I'm kind of tired of judging people, right? I want to move out of that place where I'm just like so obnoxious by the fact that there's a possibility that that person or whole girl can read my thoughts, right? I'm kind of getting sick and tired of it already, um, and I'm trying to move on from that, right? But anyways, but this person seemed like they knew what they were talking about, and so then I'm just like, well, like as a society, we put a value on stuff, and we label that value based on the interaction given that to that label, right? So, for example, um, like a decent pair of shoes versus a non-decent pair of shoes, right? So the more that someone, so it's kind of like supply and demand too, right? So that's like a label. There's labels, but it's expressed in a different way. So if if the demand if the demand is high, and that then well if the demand is high, then that means a lot of people like that, right? So then you can place the value on that more because it's like one was costs more to produce because like there's a lot of people demanding it, right? So that's why they call it supply and demand, right? Versus if they don't like that product, then um then the value of that product is gonna not be so pricey, right? And that can go for a lot of things, right? Not just product, it, right? Not just products. That can just be like interactions, right? So like if 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 a person likes to be around someone who's funny, then they place the value on humor, right? They labeled the humor at a certain value, and if they don't get that certain value out of that person, um, or group, whatever they're trying to function with, then they're not going to interact with it, right? And that kind of goes from a lot of things, right? Um, like how we value things and 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 how we're influenced, possibly manipulated into 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 like value value how would I say value to value, right? Right? Basically, like give meaning to these markings that we um, distinguish in life, right? So so like it's kind of weird because like when I when I talk to someone who's going to be a psych major, right? Um, I could pick apart their diagnosis, right? Their little theory or their like little like chart that symptoms that people display. Um, it the display the disorder that they're trying to categorize that individual with, right? So and then I could twist it to a point where, or I could manipulate it to a point where their value, their value, right? Their basically the value is like moderate, profound, excessive, right? Mild types of symptoms, and so I can decrease their value, right, with their symptoms, or decrease the symptoms that they categorize as symptoms, and and manipulate those symptoms into a way that it's a way of living, right? And then I can say, well, that's not technically symptoms that they're displaying. It's just a way of living, and then they'll get either one, they'll see my point, two, think that I'm crazy, or um, three, just like give up. They're like, oh no, like I'm talking to a brick wall. Like this person doesn't know what they're talking about. But like, if you were to hear the conversations that I had with some of these people, right, then there's evidence in what I'm talking about. And wait till I learn more about some of this stuff that's been like that they're still gonna eat, right? That we're for. Then I'm gonna eat them up further because like I just had a live the other day where I was like I went to class. I think it was Thursday or Wednesday, last Wednesday. Um, I think that was like the 28th or something like that. Yeah, it was Wednesday the 28th, so it was 126, no 128:26. That was last Wednesday. I had a conversation with a student who's about to graduate, and she was trying to say um, that schizophrenia is 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 like is a variant, right? It's a mutation, and that there's no that there's like treatment, but there's no like it's natural. Basically, we saying that schizophrenia is natural because for the simple fact that it that it just comes out of nowhere, right? But then no, schizophrenia it doesn't just come out of nowhere. You have to like either one, you either have to have the genotype or the phenotype that expresses that schizophrenia, right? And and if you do, then that means that somehow, some way, your gene, your genetic code has learned that information, implemented it into your DNA, just in case you display some of these schizophrenic symptoms, right? And I think the reason is a lot of people display some of these schizophrenic symptoms, but they're minor expressions, right? They're minor expressions. Hallucination, right? For example, a lot of people daydream. That's a form of hallucination, right? And so then, depending on their environment, they'll hallucinate more, right? Driving to work, things like sitting in the car, going somewhere, they tend to hallucinate. They tend to have these daydreams. And since it's so common that people are just like, oh, like we can't call that like a mild symptom of schizophrenia, because if we do that, then pretty half of the population, if not more, would be schizophrenic. And then we have to be like, well, these people who are actually having these real hallucinations, right? Such as drug abuse, um, and right, and traumatized people who actually have sustained some type of damage to that region of the brain that causes those hallucinations, right? Because you can get damage, you can suffer some type of damage, car accident, some type of concussion, a blow to that lobe, right? And these can manifest um, manifest these not manifest but express express these uh, genotypes that are already encoded in our DNA. Because I feel like everybody has um, one way or another some type of genotype of everything. Because because as a species, and in order and through evolution, we have learned that it is better to keep genotypes encoded in our DNA just in case there's some type of trauma in our life, and some type of trauma in our life, and we know how to deal with it. We know how to express it, and that's why they're learning about this whole new thing called epigenetics, where like environments play a factor in the expression of a genotype gene, right? And so, but that's, dude, like they proved that a long time ago, back to Darwin's freaking theory of evolution, right? How these the animals, how they adapted to their environment, and and they and their genotype, if they did have that type of gene, was being it was transformed to a phenotype based on the stress or the need, right, to adapt to that environment. So like that's basically how things function. And that's why I feel like um, when I learn about pruning, right, where neurons are constantly editing or just being cut out because the brain is just like, I'm not going to need to like it's pruning, but I think what it is, it's pruning the 23 chromosomes from from the from both sides of its donors, right? So like for example, like I said, we're getting 23 chromosomes from the mom, and we're getting 23 chromosomes from the dad. And when those mix up, we get 46 chromosomes, right? Everybody knows that. However, what I feel like they fail to see is that there's going to be duplicates, right? Whether that's recessive or dominant, recessive, right? You're going to get duplicates. And the, so then that's the thing that we're pruning. We're pruning the redundancy in the information. So there's no need for me to keep new information of a gene if I already have one information. And so then that's what's being pruned. We're pruning the information that that carries the nutrients, right? And sometimes I feel like um, sometimes there might be a way that like it slips it doesn't move, right? And then you get mutations, you get variations that way, right? Um, and but like and that's and that's still like I think that's like the fact that you can call it nature, but at the same time it's nurture because it's if environments are part of nurture, right? If environments dictate the way genes are expressed and right expressed, or they could be hidden, they could be like subconsciously expressed, right, without us even knowing. Then that's still nurture, not nature. Um, so like I do believe once upon a time there probably was a form of nature where we're constantly seeing, right? But I think that we're at an age where it's already nurtured. Like a lot of this information that we're learning is old information, information that could be lost, right? In time. Um, but anyways, um, so my whole point of what I'm trying to talk about is like psychology. It's a it's like a it's basically like a dumber version of philosophy. That's what psychology is. It's a dumber version of psychology. I mean, of philosophy, because philosophy teaches you the same thing of the mind, right? In philosophy, it's like about learning how to control your feelings, right? You got the Stoic, right? There's different, and then you got the way you think about two different scenarios, right? The way you like assess the thought process of people, right? Slippery slope, or not slippery slope, like the red herring. You got the slippery slope. Um, you got the fallacies. You got different things, right? That play into like either manipulation, gaslighting. Just basically that's what it is, right? And that's I just feel like philosophy is the better version of psychology. Um, but the difference is, I think the difference is that in psychology you kind of learn about what produces these emotions, right? Like the neurotransmitters and the hormones and stuff like that, right? How they interact with each other, the different regions of the brain that express the emotions, whatever, right? Feelings, moods that are being displayed. Um, but dude, that's just like I just think that it's just an umbrella. Philosophy, psychology is just an umbrella under philosophy. Um, and I just think that I think philosophy is way better than psychology. Um, because that's the closest part. And everything, like everything always has a spin on it, right? Got to connect one thing to another. But my point is this: is like is that nowadays there's bias in a lot of it. Because if there was no bias, we would be the dependent variable, or not the dependent variable, the independent variable. We wouldn't need to manipulate that, right? Um, so it's just like the example you gave me. Like violent video games can cause um, uh, a child with a child to display aggressive behavior, right? So, so then, well, it depends, like depending on the what we consider violent, right? There's all a different, I would say, nominal, or to be nominal or ordinal category that we can put violence in, right? Violence for one person would be just like staring at a person wrong, right? That's a form of violence, right? Aggressive, right? You're staring at someone wrong, that's a form of aggression. Um, hitting, hitting the wall, that's a form of aggression, right? Um, and then there's gonna be more like a physical, right? Hitting the wall is physical, but then you get like physical for a person, that's a higher form of aggression, right? Actually, but then like people can actually say, well, aggression is aggression, whether that's displayed physically or mentally, right? Um, there's still a form of aggression, and depending on who is the person to say that value of, of aggression is based on, I guess, society's norm. And that's going to go back to what I was talking about, is about that that if it's normal, then the value doesn't have much of a value, right? But it depends on what we dictate as what kind of value we're seeking, right? So, like we can like there could be a normal C between cars, right? The value of one car may be higher than the other, and that's normal because we put a value on that freaking on that on that on that on that category, right? And so then it just goes back to value, places of value, availability, and how common it occurs, and if it occurs more often, then we kind of accept it as a social norm, right? And so like if imagine like imagine being an animal, right? And you're able to think as an animal, and you fly from I don't know, from a third world country, right, somewhere in the world, and you fly from that third world country, right? If you're a bird or whatever, right? Somehow you're transported, whether it's flying, ship, water, however, right? You're basically moving from one environment to the next. Whatever it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a specific animal. It could be any animal. And this any animal that you wish to be was had the capability of thinking like that, right? So you move from that environment, you go to another environment, and you're just like, what the hell? Like, why do these like people live this way? Like that's not what I saw with the other humans over here, right? And that's the same thing, like moving from one state to another, right? So you move from California and you move to like a southern state, like Alabama or something, you're gonna be like, damn, you can find things. Like I can hear an accent, I can hear like a different tone of voice, right? So there's a shift there. And so then so like you're gonna be like, holy crap! Like people are gonna be able to identify you because you don't have that accent, right? And they're gonna be like, hey, you're not from around here, where are you? Because they identify the normal, they identify that normal frequency, which is the voice, um, to that region as having a specific tone. And if they hear a different tone, they're going to be like, hey, wait a minute, check it out. And identify, right? That feels a lot of different things, the way you dress, right? Go to India or like Texas and they have like a different way they wear stuff, right? And you if you go there dressed like an American or just anybody different, and then they're gonna be like, hey, well, wait a minute, that's not like they're gonna be able to identify, and that's what I'm talking about. Different environment than one. Where may one may where one may be or where one thing may be normal in one place is abnormal in another. And that's kind of where I think comes down. Those are the things that are like do keep us in the way that we are. Because like if we stop calling things and stop placing a value on things as a society, we would probably get we would probably have less variation, right, in our genes, and and we would probably go back to the old days how we built it. I don't know how it is, right? I can't say it, but I just know that the way we live today is not the way we live today. There's too much variances now too, right? So the possibly DNA that would tell you if you're wrong, right? Because for a simple fact is that as we get older, our our genes start to change, right? There's this thing called telomeres, and there's only a certain amount of time that that cell can produce RNA, right? To kind of keep your body the way it is, and over time, it producing this RNA information gets lost. The telomere shortens after a certain amount of time, and once that thing is gone, it's gone. Like you can't. There's no bringing it back just yet. Um, so that's why, like, um, I heard this one research being done in whales. Whales are pretty big, and I think the rate of their telomeres disintegrating is way lower than ours. If I remember correctly. I think they have a lower rate of telomere loss, which if or if, or they don't have any loss in their DNA sequence, right? Basically, the RNA because that's what it is. Um, when you think of it, uh, and so um, and so they're doing studies on like I think they're blue whales or some type of whale, um, and they're finding that their telomeres um, are better than ours. And I'm assuming the reason why is because they probably don't have a good mechanism. That means like if we also have more variation, then that means our facilities need to constantly change the DNA doesn't know like what to do. Then it's just like, well, do I produce this, but it's effective. Now you're telling me you need something else. Okay, we'll go produce something else for you, but we're gonna lose a bit of the old because you want to use what new. So I don't know. It kind of makes me. It kind of makes me. It kind of makes me think like It kind of makes me think of like like I don't know, this is probably something totally different, right? It kind of makes me think about um, like this. I forgot what it's called. I forgot the name, but basically, an individual with this kind of DNA is that they have three chromosomes. I think it's two X's and one Y. And typically, a person or individual has um, and so this XXY, like this three different chromosomes, is like what what is evolution trying to tell us that that person still has the XX chromosome, XXY chromosome, is like has like some type of genetic coding, basically DNA, that uh, needs to be passed on, right? Or does it mean that that this individual who has the XXY chromosome possibly had a twin, and that twin wasn't able to split from the zygote, and it embedded itself inside that person, right? It was just like, well, Jesus, like I don't remember enough information to on the zygote, so I'm just gonna have myself basically feed myself with Mississippi, right? That could be a factor. But then there's been there's been studies or just findings of chickens where if you have a bunch of chickens by each other, there's potential or possibility that one of the chickens becomes rooster, like it transforms into the roost and becomes a rooster, right? So then I don't know if that's because like as a society, as a chicken society, right? It's called a society, right? Basically, they are just like, well, shoot, in order for us to live, we have to reproduce, and that's why they transform into one chicken, and that applies to the reason why that that some people say that it doesn't die because it's a survival mechanism. But hey, um, they need to reproduce this this gene, right? Whether that's phenotype or phenotype of the gene, they need to be passed on, right? But then we'll see, like I would like to do research, like what kind of gene expression can we have? Not even expression, like what right? And is that similar to um, a chicken and a rooster? Or is there a difference? Right? That's what I think would be I know that um, in licensing, they had said basically it's like they're biologically different. They have a certain part of the brain that is like that's different, right? So listen, but now would it be like did they now is that a mutation, right? Due to the fact of the environment, or was that something that was learned so long ago and is being expressed, or it's just in a sense, right? Or it's not non-expressive, right? Because the have that spectrum disorder with that extra, like that partial right? Or they can have a phenotype where like they have it, and so they express these symptoms or whatever it is a lot, right? Um, and so like it's just crazy how they evolve, right? How I'm not trying to be biased. I've nothing against like people who are different and things like that. I'm just wondering what makes them different. Um, and is it something like a chicken pair? It's like right, you got this girl chicken trying to be a guy, right? All of a sudden it transforms into a guy because right there's findings of that where it's reproducible. Now, is that just evolution? Is that something that they learn to do in order to survive? And is that something that applies to humanity? No. It's like, is it a survival mechanism, right? To the point where it's like, man, like my dad or my mom, right? It could be like they could be your mom, right? Your grandma, or your dad's dad, your grandpa, whatever the case it may be, was stressed out. Someone along the line, along their generation, someone got stressed out so much to the point where it was like, man, if I was this person, whether I was a girl or a guy, I mean, a lady or a guy, boy or girl, right, that this wouldn't happen to me. And so that was passed on, and then the environment, um, right, the environment, such as having uh, uh, abnormal, I wouldn't call them abnormal, but just parents who are are male or female, and displaying different characteristics, right? Such as a male being a female, or a female being a male, right? And then that ultimately also influencing their kids, right? So then now now it's kind of like an epigenetic factor that is causing these changes. Uh, so it's like there's probably not that much research. If there is, I just haven't read it, right? But it just I kind of feel like it's a long time to create or to eventually create. But yeah, we'll see. See as things progress. If I ever make it that far.